Welcome to Community Conversations, where we will be bringing you fascinating discussions with local leaders about topics that everybody's talking about. I'm Dr. Cinder Sinclair, and I'll be your host today. Our special guest is Mike Jordan, Santa Barbara City Council member representing District 2. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Cinder, for having me.
Gosh, I'm so glad you're here.
It's a great facility. First time in here, and it's wonderful.
Yeah. So, Mike, I know you and your wife, Dana, came to Santa Barbara in 1989, and you've lived on the Mesa for 35 years. And for the last almost 5 years, you have represented District 2 as City Council member. So what I'd like to talk to you about today is, or what I'd like to hear from you today is, what are your thoughts on the most important and, sometimes controversial issues facing your district and the city of Santa Barbara? How does that sound?
That sounds good. I'll actually extend that timeline for you also. We actually live in my grandparents' house, original house on the Mesa. So I grew up in San Pedro, Southern California, and spent all my life coming up to visit my grandparents also. And I think I told you that weird little detail that we're blessed to be the third of 5 generations of Jordans to live in our house.
Gosh.
So we have a daughter, son-in-law, and grandchildren that live with us too. So that's how we get to the 5. So
wow, that is really special.
So I've been blessed to spend almost the last 5 years representing the Mesa, a part of the city that I would say is the best part of the city, and it's a pleasure, I think, there to get up every day and realize you live in a very special place, and how fortunate you are, unlike other cities or larger cities. That Santa Barbara is a great starting point for living somewhere and working to benefit the community.
Yeah.
So, on the Mesa, I'd say, I guess to your question, that probably the 3 challenges and things that I'm prioritizing working on currently are the erosion of single-family neighborhoods due to the proliferation of short-term vacation rentals.
Oh,
So
okay.
they eat up the housing stock, and they change the tenor of the neighborhood from families that live there for long-term into guests that turn over every week as your neighbors.
So does that fall under sort of the bigger umbrella of housing?
It negatively affects housing,
Yeah.
definitely.
Okay.
Obviously, so does the rampant inflation of housing costs and housing purchase price. But just that you're taking a post-World War II tract home maybe off the blocks of being available for the next family that moves in there, and turning them into a commercial property that goes to the highest bidder on, like a hotel, negatively affects the housing stock and your neighborhood.
And so a lot of that is happening to the detriment of not just District 2, not just the Mesa, probably all over the city.
Yep, all over the city. If you see a scatter shot of the city, scattershot graph, the dots are actually so close that you can barely tell a distance between the dots. There's probably about 1,400 or 1,500 short-term vacation rentals in the city, and unfortunately, about 1,000 of those are currently unregulated or unpermitted. So it's probably a paradox to cities when a paradigm changes so quickly that cities can't catch up quick. So 5 or 10 years ago, Airbnb and VRBO didn't even exist.
Gotcha.
And so as that model began, somebody had that idea, and then the consequences started. Anywhere that's in an attractive place to visit is playing catch up, trying to remedy the consequences of that new type of dynamic.
Well, so in your opinion, then, what do you think we can and or should be doing about that?
Well, I think we clearly have areas of the city that are tourism-based. So I would use, let's just, for example, say West Beach and East Beach, maybe the State Street corridor also. And that's where we should concentrate the type of transient guest that comes in for a weekend or a week at a time and then leaves and is replaced by another one. but where we have single-family residences or even multifamily residences, and you want to build kind of the cliche of the fabric of a community that lives there, works there, plays there, we shouldn't allow them.
So can you regulate that? I mean,
Yes, you can legally. The problem is we're just playing catch up against the rapid development of it, and the I think just historically municipalities change slowly to adapt to what's taking place. So we're getting there. We've started on that pathway.
we meaning the city council
The
members?
city council, yeah. A
Okay.
couple, Eric Friedman and I brought an action item to council the start of June to direct staff, our executive team and staff, to develop a plan to begin better enforcement and a look at where we would allow them that makes sense and where we don't want to allow them. So
That is great. Well, good for you.
we hear all the time from people that have lived in neighborhoods and their children have grown up there, and the tenor of that neighborhood like that, where literally you could have a street with 20 houses and 10 of them now are vacation rentals.
Golly.
So it's not a leap of imagination to understand how quickly that would change a neighborhood from one type of a neighborhood to another.
I would imagine you'll be getting some pushback from those folks that.
Probably, yeah, because there's always money involved. And,
Oh, yeah.
It's just part of the trying to find the balance of kind of that fabric of the community. What else am I working on? Drought and wildfire resiliency. They both go within the same. We've been blessed the last 2, maybe 3 winters with a ton of rainfall, which of course then caused a bunch of fuel to grow on the hillsides, and then the next drought we have will make that fuel ready to go. We even saw that with the fire that was just up north of us, and then the one that's ravaging up in Butte County around Chico and those places. That's another example of they had great rain for the past 3 winters and then tons of fuel. And now the first time you get dry weather and a fire that sparks, you have a calamity. So the coastal zone, where the mesa's in, so once you get over the hill, kind of proper onto the mesa, actually has 2 different high fire hazard areas, and they run kind of, one runs kind of parallel with the ocean above Cliff Drive, so that hill you come over, the Carrillo TV Hill, all the way down to City College, then all the way down to Las Positas. That's one zone. And then another zone is the area of Campanile and Yankee Farm, and that runs from there all the way up the Las Positas Valley. And those are target areas right now to improve the way that we handle brush, to be ready for the next drought and keep the fuel levels down, and what we can do with the residents to both help to keep the fuel loads down and then prepare them for the inevitability of the next bad fire and evacuation and what takes place.
I'm just so glad you're talking about this, because I bet most people in Santa Barbara don't realize the breadth and the depth of all of the things the city council is working on.
And I would, as you know, several years ago we changed to district elections rather than citywide elections, and I think there's, you could talk about breadth and depth both within a district and breadth and depth citywide. So, and it's I think it's important for council members to recognize that, anybody that's elected to recognize that there's a role to play in your district where you know the district, you know people, you've lived there, you kind of get the dynamics and the nuances of the district, but also that you're participating in that role, realizing that you're one of 7 people that are also setting policy and trying to improve lives across the whole city.
Yeah, I would imagine that gets a little tricky sometimes. You want to focus on District 2, your district, and yet everybody in Santa Barbara is counting on you to look at the whole city issues. Maybe they're not in conflict, but I don't know.
Probably
How
the
does that work?
opposite. I think everybody in the district is hoping you'll just look at your district
Oh,
stuff,
gotcha.
and those outside are not necessarily looking to you for help, but I had a cute little saying when I ran for first term, and that was that considerations and decisions you make have to, if they have to be good for your district while being good for the city also, and vice versa. If you're looking at something that involves the entire city, while being good for the entire city, it also has to be good for your district. So
That's good. Yeah.
I don't know how applicable that is in every situation, but I
Yeah.
think it's a reasonable goal to strive for in the conversation of how you balance out your decisions to both the short term and the long term benefit of a district and the city too. Sometimes the short term benefits override the long term benefits of the other, the other party
Gotcha.
there. But I think it's overall it's appropriate to look at it as a big picture of the whole city.
So let's maybe still under the umbrella of housing, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the two types of affordable housing. Everybody talks about that. Let's make more affordable housing, but it seems like there are a couple of definitions there.
So probably more than a couple. So typically when we talk about housing from a policy perspective, and for 10 years before I was elected, I was a planning commissioner, which deals with land use and housing every week. What we typically call affordable housing is what we call capital A affordable.
Okay.
And that is subsidized government participation in housing for low income renters, usually. And then there are other levels of affordable housing. And so the capital A is some of the most needed, most impactful housing that we don't have. So these are people who don't make very much money, are finding it hard to live here, but they're providing the essential services behind the scenes, whether, they're the restaurant workers, your landscapers, your service workers, that type of thing. And it's essential that they're part of this community. But they're also the most economically challenged, whether it's housing, food insecurity, medical care, all of those. But when you're looking at housing, so when you say affordable, capital A affordable, that typically is for the benefit of that category of person or family. But there's other affordable housings that we suffer through a shortage of too, and that comes by many names. Some people call it workforce, middle income. Maybe that's the two most popular names. And that would be also my poster children for that would be your single teacher, your single nurse, your single white collar worker. People who are just entering the workplace out of college with a degree. So they make enough money that they don't qualify for the capital A subsidized housing, but they still don't make enough money to pay an appropriate amount of rent in the highly inflated rents in Santa Barbara. So it's this constant game, this constant challenge to try and pursue not just one affordable housing pathway, capital A, but to make sure that we're also recognizing that there's other essential employees and employers who need employees in the city in the middle income or workforce housing, that we also need to find a way to help with housing production, help with housing rental rates, help with housing quality for both of those groups.
And so it seems like there are a lot of sort of ideas that people are floating around. Like, is there something that we're talking about at the La Cumbre Center, State and Hope? That's what tell us about that or other.
Anytime we have a project, the city's interested in trying to elevate the amount of either type of affordable housing or both types of affordable housings in a project. We actually have a policy, so if you go build 10 apartments or more, you have to provide 10% of the total units as affordable housing.
Small A.
Could be
Oh,
small
either
A
one.
or big A. Yeah.
Okay.
I think we give you that option, but unfortunately, unless somebody's subsidizing that from the government, and if you just leave the private developer, it is usually small A. So it's a middle income moderate income.
Gotcha.
La Cumbre, or even Paseo Nuevo, which will be another large project
yeah,
coming.
right.
But both of those projects represent a scale that is so large that letting them only build 10% of their units to some type of affordable housing seems like an opportunity lost.
Oh,
So we are working probably more actively right now on the timeline with La Cumbre to try and increase that affordability percentage, whether it's capital A or small a or a combination of both, above the historical requirement of 10% to get a better return on that for a community benefit than such a big project would normally bring.
so what percentage do you think it ought to be?
Well, I'll mention Eric Friedman. He and I had brought to council, we're actually bringing to council this Tuesday, a week from this Tuesday, the 20th, a plan for council to consider what's called a development agreement, which has staff begin to negotiate directly with the project developers for an agreement that locks in benefits and responsibilities for both sides. So locks in those for the city, their responsibilities and the benefits they're going to get, and locks in with the developer their responsibilities on what they're going to provide and some things that they're going to get too. And our target right now is that 10% that's required, plus another 15% of affordable housing. And then we're also working with them. So our target's 25%.
Okay.
But we're also working with a new chamber startup program called Housing Consortium, where we would also add to that, but it would be more like the model of Cottage Hospital's housing program over at the old St. Francis, where an employer writes a master lease for a certain number of apartments and pays market rent to the landlord, but then the employer subsidizes the cost of rents to its employees. And what's interesting about the Chamber's model is they would go out and find multiple employers, hence the consortium name. Cottage was big enough by itself to go take over the whole St. Francis campus and do their own project just for them. But they're already having trouble. That project is full, been full forever, but they're already having trouble when a nurse comes out of Channel Islands nursing program and they're located in Ventura and they want to hire a nurse, that they can't get somebody to live here because they can't afford the market rate rents. And so Cottage would be also a target to participate in the Chamber's new program that they're trying to put together. So,
Wow.
though, if it was an easy problem, somebody would have solved this already in California. It's a problem that afflicts California, whether you're on the coast or inland, and it affects other metropolitan areas. San Francisco's got a long history of problems with rent prices. Los Angeles does. If you go back east or any of the big cities between here and there in the flyover states, they all have some form of a housing affordability crisis. Ours is a little more made impossible by the fact that we're a tourist town. There's opportunities to leverage what you own, like short-term vacation. Turn your rental into a short-term vacation rental, and just take. That's no longer a unit that's available. And that if housing becomes available, it's attractive for people who don't live here of means, who can't afford it, to just come get a place here. The number we wouldn't know, but I just anecdotally, I think it wouldn't be unreasonable to think probably in the greater Santa Barbara community, so say Carpinteria to Goleta, that there's at least 500, maybe more, second homes that are only used part of the year by somebody who lives in Wisconsin or Nebraska and could afford a second home. And those, again, just because it's an attractive place to live, those have been housing units that have been taken off of the housing stock and further exasperate the problem of if there's less units, the price goes up. And just if there's less units, it's harder to find a place no matter the price.
Well, and it seems like I remember you saying one time, we meaning Santa Barbara, we need to decide what kind of people we want to attract.
Right.
The really, really high net worth people, or the people like the firemen and the police.
So that's true. I think I don't know that we've tried to do anything, but obviously a place like Santa Barbara does attract the better off high net worth person
sure.
just by basis of being attractive, the type of housing it has. And clearly, historically, I have a friend who's writing a book about her grandfather who was a doctor, planning commissioner, and council member in 1926. And of course, all the way back then, they were talking about water and housing, affordability of housing. So here we are 100 years later and talking about the same thing. So, that's probably pretty depressing, like, will it ever get fixed? But I think in particular, when you see an opportunity, say, we talked about La Cumbre and the scope of that, the size of that, and Paseo Nuevo, when you see those opportunities, you have to go chase them. So I'll drop my favorite Jerry Brown quote from his first set of terms when he was governor, and that was that if you do nothing, you do something. So you're forced with a dilemma, and if you just tighten up and say, "Oh, I don't know what we should do," so you do nothing, that still leaves you with a dilemma. And so you need to keep trying to find a pathway or an avenue that works, whether your problem is housing, homelessness, whatever, any of the other, financial stability for the city, whatever the challenge is, you can't just sit there paralyzed and not try and do something. Yeah. And then if that doesn't work, you try something else. If that does work, then you try and replicate that to keep building upon that.
So when it comes to the housing, it sounds like what you're really looking for is a balanced approach, where there's room for everybody.
I think that'd be accurate. Yeah.
So before we leave housing, remind me, what role does the Housing Authority? They're pretty important.
So they're a quasi government organization within the city. They're not part of the city, but their function is to focus on that capital A affordable housing.
Okay.
And even if I have $1 in the city budget to go chase that, the Housing Authority, then they take their role is they take that dollar and they go turn that into $2 or $3 with government funds that are available to build specific types of housing.
Okay.
The good news is that's what they can do really well. The bad news is the subsidy dollars don't extend into the small A affordable need of the middle income workers, the workforce housing. Okay. And so if you're very, very successful, which we arguably are with capital A, we have much more capital A housing than other cities of our size. We've done really well that way. The need is still there. But if you don't address that other small A affordability shortfall too, you eventually, I'll be flippant, you eventually look up, and if I want to get my tires changed, I have to drive to Santa Maria or Ventura kind of thing, just because those small, not paid well type of employees can't live here, and you watch those services erode eventually.
That is a really good example. Yeah. So,
and I think we probably go out to eat like you do, kind of things, and we've seen restaurants now that aren't open at dinner or that have trouble even when they're open because they can't find $20 an hour wage employees that can afford to live here. Yeah. And so the landscape changes on the services they can offer. More obscene but a little higher up the pay scale would be if you call Samsung right now, it'd probably take you 3 months to get in to see your doctor.
Oh, amen to that.
And so, that is the same thing. Even somebody who's going to get paid in six figures, $150,000 a year, can get an offer and look here and go, well, where am I going to live for that in the level that I think I'm supposed to live? Yeah. And so you end up even with that level of shortage of employees, and And that affects everybody's quality of life just as much as a restaurant's not open or your movie theater can't find ushers or that type of thing.
That's a really good point. So let's sort of shift over to the topic of homelessness.
Okay.
That's something everybody's
I let
talking
that
about,
one out of
isn't
the
it?
bag, didn't I?
Yeah. So tell us your thoughts
So
on that.
that's another one. If there was an easy fix, we would
Good
have found an
example.
answer to it in California.
Yeah.
I think the latest stat still holds true is that California has about a third or a quarter of all the homeless people in the United States, the unhoused people in the United States. And
A third, say that again, a third?
either 25% or 30% of all the unhoused people in the United States are in California.
Oh, yeah.
So
Okay.
the weather's nice. We have probably a better number of compassionate people in California than maybe other places. I'll
Probably
wave
right.
that flag and say
Yep.
that's true. But so it's a challenge. I think we are currently in a place where the city is with our partners in the county and other munis next to us, and particularly Goleta, we're doing better and better on that front. The tiny homes projects that you see going up, we have one in downtown, we have one out on Modoc. There's another one about to open or has opened up in Lompoc. Those are showing success about getting people off the streets, out of the bushes where they've historically been. And they've been shy about going to shelters because of what I call the 3 Ps, pets, privacy, and personal belongings. So when you couldn't go into a shelter with a pet, and you lose all your privacy, and you frequently had your belongings stolen if you went into. And so these little units that are like not even as big as this room we're in right now offer locked doors, offer the availability of pets, and give you some privacy, obviously. And so we put people in there that qualify and want to go there, and then we have services and programs that are right there, whether that's mental health, addiction services, social workers, people to get them signed up what we call paper ready, so that they have their social security card, they have an ID card, and so when a job opportunity appears or a real apartment appears, they have documents ready to join kind of the mainstream world kind of thing. So those are very successful. And then the city's personally has been very successful in what we call neighborhood navigation centers. And we had one for a couple of years at the Carrillo Castillo parking lot that starts with the theory that instead of taking your resources and spreading out all over the city and, so to speak, chasing the homeless where they are, every nook and cranny or in the bushes on the hillsides, you put a centralized location where there's a group of unhoused in that area, and you bring services there that they would like to see, and you bring services there that you would like them to see. And so one of the big attractions at the Neighborhood Navigation Center is Showers of Blessing, these big trailers that they pull up once a week. And
What a
who
great
doesn't like a
service.
warm shower, right?
Yep.
And so that's kind of the attractant, and some little food stuff there. And then all of our partners are there too. So County Be Well, Mental Health Services, Doctors Without Walls, our Library on the Go is there to help them. They'll have laptops and internet connections to help them sign up and start to get paper ready. Oh, there's other people I'm forgetting that are part of that too. And so just a couple months ago, we finally inked, well, more than a couple months ago, we inked it, but a couple months ago, we opened a permanent building as a navigation center to replace holding it outdoors on a parking lot covered with dirt. And that's in the 600 block of Chapala Street. And that now puts all of our service providers in one place, has a big parking lot where the Showers of Blessing can still come. And I should have brought some stats with me, but in the 2 months they've been open, I think they have over 200 clients now. So unique clients, over 200 unique clients that they've enrolled in their services and are coming in to use the center, meet with the resource providers, meet with the social workers, the mental health professionals, that type of thing, and work on getting ready for whether it's another tiny house, tiny home development that gets going, or even ready to a low-income apartment that would appear. So it's been very, very successful. And we located purposely right off of downtown to attempt to draw there's probably a core of a couple hundred homeless or unhoused people that hang out in the downtown area,
Yeah.
whether it's up and down State Street or in the parks around downtown or near the library type of thing. And so it was specifically located there to chase those people and to draw them off of the downtown corridor and to begin to work with them.
So this navigation center, is it open every day?
So it's open 5 days a week.
Okay.
And I want to say 7:30 to 3. I'm pretty close, I think. And it works under what's called a conditional use permit because of its location, because it's in a retail corridor, and we had to jump through our own hoops of getting a conditional use permit. But so far, literally zero. We did a lot of outreach, myself included, to the neighborhood around there, the businesses and the homes around there. And so far, I want to say, knock on wood, we've had no incidents or no complaints. It's been very well managed.
That's great.
They have a core SB Act. I think we've talked about them. They manage the building in terms of all the other resources that are and sort of serve as our umbrella management there. And they actually went out and recruited like a dozen formerly homeless people that were in either real housing or these tiny homes to serve as neighborhood monitors. So they would have some type of bonding if they were out there, and say somebody came and got services and then walked away a block and parked themselves in the front entry of a retail store. That's not what we're about. We're not about attracting somebody over to a place where they weren't before and then having an impact. So we constantly have these there's a word for them, maybe ambassadors or neighborhood ambassadors that are out in the neighborhood making sure that that type of impact isn't happening. And the good part is they're much more effective than me going out or a police officer going out, because they have that shared experience of being homeless prior.
Well, congratulations. That sounds great. And once again, trying to find a balanced approach.
Yep.
And to keep trying.
Yep. And I think it goes back to, my Jerry Brown quote that I just misuse all the time. Literally, you can complain about it and it's still going to be there. You can gnash your teeth over legislation or court rulings that hamper our ability to, simply remove somebody from a street, that type of thing. Or you can constructively and, hopefully compassionately work on the problem. I would say from my point of view, the next step has to be resolution of what to do with people who are clearly, in our perspective, mentally ill and unable to take care of themselves, or addiction afflicted and unable to take care of themselves, and to be able to pull them without their permission off the street into a rehab type of facility. If we're wildly successful in our efforts, unfortunately, right now, that's who will remain on the street, is the people who say no and the people who act up the most because they're just not there in reality with the rest of us. And that will be the next wave that we'll have to figure out how to work with. Most of that relies on funding from the state and the county. Our city is too small to get direct funding from the federal government or the state. So a lot of our resources that we get that don't come from our general fund, we're reliant on other sources.
Okay.
So it'll be interesting to see how the projected state deficit in the next couple of years affects that effort, because I think we're doing really good work with really good financial resources right now.
Well, thank you and to your fellow council members for all of this fabulous work that you're doing. And okay, well, every now and then, somebody might have an opinion about what should happen on State Street. Maybe we should talk about that.
Just one opinion, huh?
Yeah. How
So
do you see that?
it's been unarguably a long slog of a process with a too large committee to get to where we are today. But I'd say we're standing on the cliff, about to fall into some decisions being made. I think it's coming to council the second week, I think, of September.
Hmm.
And I expect what you will see is a sort of split the baby in half, where we will focus on the lower half of the State Street corridor and open the upper half up to vehicles again. So say the 5, 6, 7, 800 block will be our focus for a pedestrian and bicycle-oriented corridor with no cars, but still has a shuttle going down the middle of the street for
Mm-hmm.
those who need a shuttle. And above that, up to the whatever it is, 12 or 1300 block where the Arlington is,
Uh-huh.
that will return to either cars going both directions, or at least cars going one direction north, and bicycle lanes on the side. Um, just one fact that has stayed prevalent through this too long of a process, and that is overwhelmingly, by any measuring point you want to look at, whether it's surveys, word of mouth, emails, meeting somebody and just acting them, hearing from your friends, it's clear that the community wants a predominantly
Mm-hmm.
pedestrian oriented something to be in the center of town.
Yeah.
I don't want to get lost in the words of street, because it's maybe not a street anymore.
Yeah.
Promenade, because our promenade might look different than a promenade in Europe, that type
Yeah.
of thing. So, but it's clear that the future, from the community's opinion, lies in not having cars go from the Dolphin Fountain all the way through State Street. That
Mm-hmm.
we're looking to bring a more pedestrian experience to at least a large part of that area. We'll bracket that. I think the reasoning behind that is we'll bracket that with, there's a project that's just about open. It's leasing right now. That's behind the former Staples building there in the 400 block of State Street, that has I want to say 80 apartments in
Mm-hmm.
it of
Mm-hmm.
varying sizes. So there's going to be 200 people there, let's say, pretty soon. And then the Paseo Nuevo project in the 700 block will have anywhere from 600 to 700 apartments. And I believe that project will go forward. I don't know how soon it will be done. It might take 5 years to get completed. So when you look, and then we're just about to let the bond process start for the new police station and De La Guerra Plaza, but I
Mm-hmm.
expect probably sometime by the end of 2025, we will start reconstruction of De La Guerra Plaza, which will change the kind of the civic center of downtown,
Mm-hmm.
and re-engage and revitalize that. And so those 4 or 5 blocks that I mentioned as being pedestrian oriented are going to see a whirlwind of change in the next 5 years, with a whole bunch more people living downtown as their starting point, rather than driving or coming to downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And it will, even if you did nothing, it will want to push that section of State Street to a more pedestrian oriented,
Mm-hmm.
just due to the number of people living on both ends of it.
Yeah.
So there's still opinions out there on it should be all cars. There was an interesting article today on the business column that Josh Molina does in Newshawk, with the latest Hayes commercial report that says vacancy levels on State Street are lower now than they were pre-COVID, that retail is leading some of the gains there, that so to speak, the arguments against a pedestrian-oriented way are not just about opinion from the community member, but there are also data facts out there that show that You don't need cars going up and down the street to lead a return to vitality or retail, that both of those will organically come back if just people are coming down there.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, so this pedestrian-focused area, what about the bikes? Let's talk about that.
So again, I put the bikes on a newer category of like the change to short-term vacation rentals. So
Yep,
5 years ago, an e-bike was like some goofy thing you saw in Europe and
Right.
you bought. I mean, when I was growing up, it was like I had friends with these German or Swedish little motors that they put on the wheels on a bike, and you started the motor up and it pushed the bike along like, and they were all the thing. But I think e-bikes are particularly challenging in a downtown corridor even now, and e-bikes are challenging all over the city, whether you have cars with them or not, or whether they're using sidewalks. And I suspect we will be looking for a separation of all bikes and pedestrians where we set this pedestrian zone. It's pretty impossible to enforce, all day long a
Yes,
bike
yes.
or a no bike, or bike behaving well versus a bike not behaving well. And frankly, the optic of a police officer grabbing the handlebars of a 13-year-old on the bike to get him to stop is not really the optics I want to live
No.
with either. So I suspect we will have an area that's pedestrian only, and the bikes in that area will, I think preferably we will make improvements on, say, Chapala Street, that they'll just jog out a street, whether they're coming up or down, use Chapala, and then if they want to be on State Street after that pedestrian area, they will jog back into State Street.
Or you said Anacapa.
Anacapa maybe, but that's really, you can only go one way on Anacapa, so you can only go downhill. On Chapala, you could actually go, if you had to get off State Street and you were going downhill or uphill, you could go to Chapala and do that.
So didn't you have an idea of have these little gates or something where the bikes have to go, as opposed to just put a sign suggesting it?
Yeah, I've seen down at East Beach in front of the remodeled East Beach Pavilion, and where Reunion Restaurant is, they have like I think they probably inappropriately call them cattle gates, where the gates overlap each other.
Yes,
It's impossible to, like, you'd have to work really hard to stay on a bike and turn two 90-degree corners, right?
Yeah.
One way and then one the other way. And I'm sure there's the technology to do that, where they could swing, they could go away. We could also use bollards that go up and down automatically for either for a shuttle, or either if a fire truck had to go down there too. I don't doubt that there's a way to solve a problem. There usually is. It's just time and money that starts to infect the problem. But I think the key thing is to get to a point pretty soon where we're making a decision and moving forward. We've kind of been treading water and paralyzing ourselves with analysis and what ifs and that type of thing. And clearly we need to get moving and just stop listening to the static. The council members are all elected to make those kind of decisions, and it's time to make a decision.
Yeah. And so, thinking about the young e-bike riders, did you say that the city has started working with the organization MOVE to try to educate the young people about all the rules and regulations?
So one of the constraints we face is that at the state level, e-bikes and bicycles are still bikes. And so, we would cringe and say that they're going 20 miles an hour out there. They're not really a bike anymore, right?
Right.
And especially the throttle ones, where you don't even have to pedal to initiate the e-bike benefit. But so it's difficult to carve out e-bikes until the state changes some kind of legislation, without including them in all bikes. And so we've actively pursued all types of remedies or education or outreach that we can. And one of those that I know has been routinely, we think, successful is partnering with MOVE Santa Barbara County, which is the former BC Central, and their programs. They were already doing programs at the elementary school level where they set up cones like a street or a crosswalk, whatever, and they were just teaching kids on bicycles, bicycle etiquette, how to come to an intersection, what to do, that type of thing. And so they've expanded their offerings with our help to include e-bikes as part of that program,
That's
recognizing that a large number of the bike dynamics on State Street are junior high or maybe older elementary school people riding on those bikes. That would be my perception when I watch it.
Well, good. I mean, that seems like the education piece seems really, really important. So I'm glad that
hopeful on that.
Working on that.
I don't know. I mean, I'll use my cup half full on that one and say I'm hopeful that somebody will listen to the education, and because really it's just the argument, is the e-bike at fault or is it the person on the e-bike? And I think it's starting with me at 50-50%, both are at fault there, and if you can't get the person on the bike to accept more than 50% of that responsibility, then the only choice you have is to put the whole burden on just getting rid of the e-bike then.
Sure. So, gosh, I read something recently about somebody's brilliant idea. We'll see what you think of it, of taking that old bank building and turning it into farmers market, since they're going to have to move anyway. So
I'd go you one even further. I said I'm still amazed people go into banks, but it might be an age or demographic thing. But
true.
Every time I walk by a bank on State Street, I just wish there were no banks on State Street on the ground level.
Yeah.
There's particularly one just right down the block here. I think it's. Can I say Bank of America on the air? But, they take up a third of the block, but their entrance is on the back side off the cross street. And the third of the block they take up on State Street is a big 2.5-story just flat wall. Oh. And you're just going, that would probably look good in the 60s.
Yeah,
monumental in the 60s. But I saw the same article. I think it was today.
It was
today,
that
Paul Nellis and another
Carl Hutter, was
an
it
architect, but an architect too, and Carl Hutter.
Okay.
We're looking at an empty bank there with an idea of having truly the idea of a farmer's market or community market in that building. Somebody referenced one somewhere else. The one I've been to that I love is up in Napa. I have an in-law in Napa, and they have one there where food booths, flowers, fruits and vegetables, that type of thing. And they all ring around the outside of the building with a big picnic bench interior in there. And you can go there to shop for your flowers, you can go there to shop for your cooking supplies, or you can go there to even have a meal. And it opens up the possibility of really having a farmer's market type environment 7 days a week instead of the Tuesday and the Saturday one here. And then if you want to go to a different one, you have to drive up to Goleta or out to Montecito. But it gives, and it would probably give the farmers market group a home base also to build off of too. Yeah. So a really cool idea.
That seems like a
Which
really
means it probably has a lot of challenges. If it's really cool and sounds like something we should do, probably the first people that I'll have challenges with is the city process. So,
right.
But I think the people we mentioned are astute enough that they would realize the proper way to start with that is to talk to their electeds and get their electeds on board, and then we'll all walk in together and talk about the barriers that the city has to doing that.
Yeah.
So
good.
Yeah, but great idea, I think.
Yeah. It seems like.
And then if they adjusted the exterior of the building so it had like roll-up doors too, like garage, really cool, right? So every day that opened up on the outside, and you were looking into the interior, or you even had stalls inside them that you could just be on the sidewalk and do your shopping. I mean,
that's a great idea.
You'll just get me going with all my little ideas, and I'll just jinx the project.
So okay, let's switch to Mike Jordan. So can you tell us about a pivotal experience in your life?
Well, my wife would say we got married, right? all four of the births of our children were pretty pivotal. I would say, I was very close to my father. who in 2001 just fell over and died in 3 minutes.
Oh, golly.
And he was my wife used to call us the Brady Bunch, our family. She had a little different family dynamic, but she called us the Brady Bunch. And my father was very involved with all me and all four of my siblings, very involved with the grandchildren, just kind of the foundation of a family type thing. And I think that just helped me realize that you can't take stuff for granted. And I don't know that I was before that, but when you talk about whether it's personal opportunities, professional opportunities, elected opportunities, that it's really easy to get beat down by the drudgery of life or process or common opinions that are different than yours and whatever else. And I would say that keeps me motivated to continue to say that if you say, oh, it's really hard and I'll work on it slowly and maybe in a few years I'll get that done, you might not be here in a few years.
Yeah,
And so
very good point.
I'd say the the other I would call pivotal point in my life too was grandchildren. We now have 5 grandchildren under the age of 10 with our 4 kids. Really, only 2 of our kids are producing the grandchildren. But just to be around, you're really close to your kids when you grow up, for good and bad. Obviously, you're both the drill sergeant, as my wife would call me, and the parent. But the grandkids, you get to have them and then give them back. Usually, so you can do everything you want with them and then give them back, right?
Yeah.
Spoil them and give them back. But having that next generation, so not your kids' generation, but your next generation after that in your life too, I think also frames much of what you look at as that it's not so much about me or people my age anymore, or what makes me comfortable, or when you're pursuing, and say in the role as an elected, you're pursuing changes that are unpopular. But if those changes are going to positively affect the lives of maybe your kids, might be too late for 30-year-old kids, but definitely your grandchildren, if there's a possibility to work on a grandchild being raised here, going to school here, going to UC Santa Barbara, finding a great job, and then not having a place to live, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So that type, but just, and everything else that could just, the pathways in your mind that could go from that, it really starts to frame, I think, positively for me, the what and the why you're doing what you're doing. I always say too, it frequently keeps my maturity level way down below my age. So, which I think is a good thing. I will cling to that as a good thing as long as I can. But I think those 2 things, I wouldn't really call them big pivotal moments in my life, but they're really moments I can look back to where you reapply yourself, or you kind of change your mentality. That's a little different than your comfort zone that you've arrived at up till now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And so we have a couple minutes left.
Okay.
Might you have a parting message for our audience?
Well, it's an election year.
Oh,
I think you know
is that right?
So half of council is being reelected, and I'm one of those. And I have promised my wife that I will adopt a much more cup half full than cup half empty kind of personality. I'm the pessimist in our relationship. She's
really?
the annoying optimist over everything in our relationship, and that's probably why we get along so well. We're kind of opposites that way. She can worry about, oh, let's chase that, and I can worry about, how do we do that? Can it possibly be done? What's the good and the bad of that? But it's a little frustrating to be involved in the election process in today's world, and particularly I think this year. Everybody seems to start off from such a negative spot and such a divisive spot. And it even happens here. I look way too much at social media, the usual social media
Sure,
comments and stuff. And they're just full of this somebody all the way over there or somebody all the way over there. And that's really not my lane. My lane is kind of on the fence in the middle, and then let's have a discussion or make an argument and
Yeah.
push me one way or the other. I generally feel to get from somewhere to somewhere, it's a wiggly line. It's not
Sure, sure.
necessarily a
Yep,
straight
yep.
line. Is the way you bring people with you, and in living here particularly, I think many times we just forget the fact of where we are and what it's like when we get up in the morning and looking around us, and the water works and it's clean and the lights go on and the roads don't have killer potholes in them, and we are so far above the size of our city in the arts and food and beverage and
Yeah.
universities and schools and medical care and all that stuff. And yet we start these discussions or arguments down at such a low denominator that doesn't reflect how fortunate we are, much more
Right.
fortunate than maybe even some of our neighbors, but certainly as you get into the bigger cities or into the inland parts of California, we are so much more fortunate than that. And I guess my wish would be that we would learn to start these conversations or even arguments in a much more constructive manner rather than a destructive manner, within the context of just look where we are and how great it is, and build off of that rather than get stuck on some talking points that really just don't reflect what we have.
Well, thank you so much for spending this time with us and for all of the work that you do day in and day out that benefits everyone in Santa Barbara.
Thank you. Thank you again for having me. Yeah,
Yes.
it was great fun.
Yes, it was great fun. And thank you for joining us on Community Conversations, and we'll see you next time.